Good afternoon and welcome to the Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies Holdings PLC final results investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all the questions submitted today and will publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you up to Clarissa Somi-Mokoka, CEO. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and thank you. And thank you to everybody who is dialing in to hear our final results for the year ending 30 April 2023 presentation. I'm very pleased to be here talking to you about the big progress we've made over the course of the last 12 months, together with our Group Finance Director, Paul Smalley. We're going to split the session between us in terms of agenda and what we're going to cover today. I'll just talk a little bit about who we are and what we do for those of you who might be a bit new to the story of OCT and why we're here. Then I'll take us through the sort of strategic report and the highlights over the 12-month period. Also give you a programs update and a bit of an explanation of our 4 drug development programs for perhaps the people who are new to the story. Then I'll hand over to Paul, who's going to take you through the numbers, our financial report, our financial performance with highlights and also obviously the statements. And then Paul will also talk to some governance highlights and things that we've implemented during the year. Then it'll be back to me for a quick look at some post-balance sheet events and the future, what the future holds for OCT. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a quote about our mission. So here at OCT, we are working very hard to harness the therapeutic power of cannabinoids for the benefit of humankind. We believe that cannabinoids have to date been largely untapped, and there are huge therapeutic resources that really does need to be investigated properly in that pharmaceutical way that we are taking, that approach that we're taking. So how are we doing that? So we undertake robust medical research. We're following standard pharmaceutical pathway to bring new medicines to patients who are currently living with conditions that have unmet needs. So, no current treatments or poorly functioning treatments. We're using scientific methodologies, obviously, to take those cannabinoids and turn them into prescription medicines for those patients living with certain conditions. We're focusing, as I said, on unmet and unfulfilled medical needs. So, where there are big gaps in the market. And of course, we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we get through the presentation in terms of specifics. And we're focused here primarily at OCT on looking to patients and what patient outcomes people are really looking for solutions for. So we've always got patients at the heart of what we do. As I mentioned, we're a pharmaceutical company. We're following that standard regulatory pathway to bring our drugs, our programs through the standard pharmaceutical route. So phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials for regulatory approval, which means that we are looking at specific indications so we can show that our drugs are both safe and efficacious for particular conditions. That gives doctors and patients alike the confidence to prescribe and also obviously to take those medicines. And importantly, particularly for the US market, allows insurance companies to reimburse those medicines too. In terms of our target market, so we've been focusing certainly for the last couple of years at least on the global pain market, which is currently worth about £60 billion and looking to rise to about £75 billion by the time we'll have a drug approved by the regulators and in the market. That market size is focused on cancer, visceral, neuropathic, lower back and musculoskeletal pain, as well as migraine and fibromyalgia. So it's a big market, and those are the indications that we have internally identified as the ones that would benefit or would link best with cannabinoids for solutions. We've narrowed that down, of course, because it's a big target to go for. Excuse me. We've narrowed that down to neuropathic and visceral pain. And initially, our 2 lead programs are focusing on CIPN, chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, and trigeminal neuralgia, or TN for short. And I'll say a bit more about those in a second. In terms of the team, we've got a very strong bench here at OCT. I'm sure Paul will talk to his experience perhaps a bit later on in the session, but we recently announced that Dr. Tim Korn has come on board as our Chief Medical Officer. He has a very deep pedigree and deep experience across the pharmaceutical sector, previously CMO at Jazz Pharmaceuticals and many others, and has actually been involved in over 20 and led over 20 regulatory approvals, both in the US and Europe. So as we look to the future here at OCT, his expertise is going to be crucial in getting us through those phases, those regulatory hurdles cleared and get medicines to approval. Obviously, Dr. Valentina Paravicini, our Chief Scientific Officer, has been leading our R&D efforts over the last couple of years and was absolutely fundamental to getting our phase 1, our lead program, into the clinic in the record time that we achieved it. So I'm very delighted with the whole team here, but that's been a special effort from Val and his crew to really push that development fast and get there in a short time frame. Paul, I've mentioned, of course, and Rob Bennett, our General Counsel, who joined us in December of last year, has also been a fantastic addition to the team with his deep M&A experience and governance experience across PLCs and large and small companies internationally, as well as in the UK. So a really strong bench, and we're really happy that we've built the right team to take us forward to the future. So just looking then ahead at the strategic report and the things that have happened over the last 12-month period, we've got some operational highlights that I'll take you through, and then I'll give you a little programs update. So operationally, we completed the preclinical research for 46-1201, our lead program. We submitted that first combined clinical trial application to the MHRA and the Wales Ethics Committee in January. That was obviously a big milestone for us, getting that submission in. A huge amount of work from the team and from our partners. We also completed the preclinical research for 130401, our second program that's targeting trigeminal neuralgia in the period. And of course, we did get approval for our phase 1 clinical trial just after period end in May. Operational highlights continued, so ongoing work with our existing commercial partners. So I think if the year before was about putting these partnerships in place and setting foundations, this last 12-month period has really been about capitalizing on those relationships and doing the deep work that we've needed to do, all that preclinical work that perhaps isn't always the most exciting from an investor point of view or perspective, but is deeply important and foundational to getting into the clinic and moving things forward. So we've been working very closely with Evotec, who got our preclinical for our lead program completed in time for us to make that submission in January to the MHRA. Of course, Simbec, who are now currently conducting that phase 1 clinical trial, were also instrumental in putting together that submission with us. And various others, Dalriada doing the work on discovery and screening for our 3rd and 4th programs. We also appointed Axis Capital Markets as a corporate broker in the period. Final operational highlights. We had our first meeting of the Scientific Advisory Board, who have since met more times than just one. We've had several meetings over the period, and we essentially are leaning on the Scientific Advisory Board to help us shape that strategy as we go into the clinic. We've got some very esteemed professors on that board, Bob Dworkin, Professor Anthony Dickinson and Professor Giorgio Lambrou, who are all specialists in that pain area, and we really lean on their advice to help us shape the phase 1 clinical trials and beyond. As a team, we were also recognised in the Sunday Times Best Places to Work Awards, and that was a really big achievement for us. As I said earlier, we've got a small team in place, but it's working really well, and we're really proud to have been included in what is a pretty esteemed awards category. As I've mentioned, we strengthened the core team with Paul coming on as Group Finance Director and Rob as General Counsel, and of course Tim coming on as Chief Medical Officer as well. So I've talked through most of these milestones that we've just mentioned in terms of highlights, but to give you a sense of the timeline and perhaps also a little look forward. July, obviously, we had that first meeting of the SAB. August, we had a strategic budget review, which allowed us to extend our cash runway all the way to April 2024, which is still the case on the results we announced this morning. December, the preclinical work on 46-1201 and 130401 was completed, and of course, followed that up in January with the submission of the clinical trial application. April, we had a renewal of our Home Office license. We've got a very strong relationship with the Home Office. I think, it's a 5-year consecutive renewal process, and the process is pretty rigorous and rightly so, because having a license to possess and supply Schedule 1 drugs is a serious thing. So we were delighted to have that renewed. In May, of course, we got that MHRA approval to kick off our phase 1 clinical trial. In June, we appointed Tim as our Chief Medical Officer as we made that very important transition from preclinical company to a clinical stage pharma company with a program in clinical trials. So his appointment there in June. Then in July this year, we had our first dose successfully administered to a healthy volunteer, which was, as I said, a very big achievement for the team. We also appointed Dr. Paul Varkos-Smith as a specialist CIPN consultant for us, given that that's our lead indication. Paul has significant experience across the pain sector, but specialises in particular in CIPN, running a clinic at the Royal Marsden Hospital. So Q3 2023, looking a bit ahead now, we are expecting the phase 1 results for our clinical trial to be out. So we're on track for those timing-wise, and can't say too much about the progress, of course, because it's in progress and we don't have final results yet. But we're absolutely satisfied with the way that's going. And in terms of timings, we are absolutely on track. So let me just talk to a little bit about our model, perhaps. As I said, we're a small team, but we have a big pharma capability because we've built those important partnerships so we can rely on the expertise of sort of global experts in their field. And those partnerships are fundamental to the work that we're doing here at OCT and have helped us really fast track it and get that program into the clinic in I think, very short order. In terms of our programs then, let me just give you an overview of the programs that are currently under development. We have our lead program, 46-1201, which is targeting, as I said, CIPN, or chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. We also have great preclinical data for IBS for 46-1201. That's a new chemical entity, and we in-licensed it from a spin-out of Pfizer, and have obviously been working hard on the preclinical, having completed that preclinical earlier in the year, and now getting it into the clinic. 130401, our second program, is a phytocannabinoid combination, drug-device combination. It's a pressurized metered dose inhaler combining a proprietary mixture of THC, or dronabinol, in fact, synthetic THC, and CBD to deliver pain relief for that trigeminal neuralgia condition I mentioned. Programs 3 and 4 are earlier stage. We've been leaning on our library of almost 500 cannabinoid derivatives to essentially generate the pipeline and the long-term future pipeline of the company. And this is just the first sort of 2 programs that to come out of that library. The third program is, again, targeting an undisclosed orphan indication, focusing in on the pain space still. But at post-period end, we also announced that our fourth program, also coming out of the library, is targeting oncology, which is an indication expansion for us and an issue, I think, close to many of our hearts here at OCT. So just looking in a little bit more detail at 46-1201, our lead compound, our lead candidate, it's targeting the CIPN market, which is currently worth £1.17 billion. And chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy currently has no treatments in market. And we are really looking at a big problem to solve here, because about 60% of patients who have to take chemotherapy go on to develop CIPN, which is a very unpleasant and can be enduring condition, causing sensitivity to hands and feet, so the extremities, to the point where you might not be able to pick up a coffee cup or drive a car. It's very inhibiting and often causes people to stop taking their chemo, which is obviously not an outcome that's in patients' best interests, or families' best interests. In terms of where we're at, as I've mentioned, we're in our phase 1. It's a first-in-human randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, single ascending oral dose study. And we are, cancelling a call out there, apologies. So it's a single ascending dose, as I've said. It's targeting, what we're trying to achieve with this phase 1 is safety, tolerability in healthy volunteers. So we're assessing, the safety of this compound when it goes into healthy humans, and then the tolerability essentially. It's, as I said, progressing on track, and we are aligned for results calendar Q3 this year. Secondly, just moving on to our second program, OCT 130401. As I've mentioned, that's targeting the trigeminal neuralgia market. £1.8 billion currently worth, which is obviously a significant market. and it is it's a very serious condition. So sufferers essentially have very serious onset and unexpected onset of sharp stabbing pain, can be electric shock-like pain in the face, and it's really unpleasant. So currently no treatments out there. And as I've said, we're going through the inhaled device route because that gives you a faster onset of for the delivery of that pain relief, essentially. We have, as I said, completed our phase one. We're ready for phase one. Wish we'd completed phase one. We're ready for phase one, and we have completed that preclinical work, which has taken, a significant amount of time and effort and energy from the team. And we are very pleased to say, we've got to that specific milestone. Turning to programs 3 and 4, we obviously, again, I've mentioned our cannabinoid derivative library, which currently has about 475 compounds in the library. We in-licensed in September of 21, 335 compounds from Canopy Growth. We have the exclusive rights, including 14 patent families to those compounds. And we've used that license to build out our library, and we've continued to synthesize new compounds from that library, or adding to that library. The benefits of that library, essentially, we're talking cannabinoid derivatives, so THC or CBD, etc., modified to improve stability, bioavailability, and essentially really just sort of improve the nature of those cannabinoids to make them more bioavailable and stable in the body. And we've had some success there. So just turning to the individual programs. So program 3, we're looking at an undisclosed orphan pain indication, as I mentioned a moment ago. And we've had some interesting data in terms of the activity of this compound. It's more active at 3 mg per kg than THC, I should say. So it's got a better analgesic effect and a lower psychoactive effect in our early preclinical studies. So we're very excited about that and the potential that could have. Program 4, as I've mentioned, is a potential first-in-class immunotherapy agent for the treatment of solid tumours. Again, an indication expansion for us and a really exciting potential treatment at a very early stage, but we're all thrilled. Essentially, the way that works is by turning back on the body's own immunotherapy response to the tumour. So very excited about that. Paul, I think over to you for a look at the financial statements.
Okay, thank you, Clarissa, and thank you everybody for joining the presentation today. I'll pleasure to spend a short amount of time going through the financial results for OCT for the 12 months up to April 2023. So we'll go through some of the highlights on this page, and then the following 2 or 3 slides will show a bit more detail on the different financial statements. So the income statement is as follows. The programme spend in the year was for £4.3 million, of which the majority of it was on our 2 lead programmes, totalling just over 4 million of that £4.3 million. Administrative costs during that time, which includes salaries, insurance and professional fees, amounted to £2.7 million. So as a consequence, OCT posted a loss before tax of £7 million. But as a company who are heavily involved in research and development, we're able to generate an R&D tax credit of £1.1 million. So in the year, our net loss is £5.9 million. The impact on this activity that Clarissa's discussed on cash was as follows. At the end of April 23, our cash balance was £2.3 million, which was from an opening position of £9.2 million. So a net cash movement of £6.9 million in the year. Exiting the year in April 23, the cash runway is currently to the end of Q1 2024, but crucially this includes being able to complete the phase 1 trial of our lead programme OCT 461201. The balance sheet is the following highlights. As at April 23, we have £4.5 million current assets, which is split predominantly between cash and receivables relating to R&D tax credits. Our current liabilities are very low and have reduced dramatically from the previous year end at 0.6 million, with half of that as trade payables, and we have no long-term liabilities in the business. So the net assets for LTT at the end of April 2023 were £3.9 million. I'm pleased to say that post year end, the company has received the R&D tax credit back from HMRC relating to the financial year 2022. We went through a very thorough and rigorous case checking with HMRC, but it stated it was successful and our full claim was repaid. This endorses our position and what we're doing from a research and development point of view, and should mean that our future claims are expedited and move forward in a timely manner to receive the cash back, especially at a time when HMRC have been more stringent and thorough in checking claims from companies that are putting them in. So we are very confident going forward we can continue to explore this avenue for a revenue stream. So moving on to the income statement, and then just doing some comparisons to the previous year end, as I just touched on. The research costs were £4.3 million, of which 2 million of that was on our lead programme, of which 1.6 million was to complete our preclinical phase. We spent 0.4 million on an initial spend with our vendor, who is currently undergoing our phase 1 trial. And then 1.9 million was spent taking second programme 130401 through to completion of preclinical spend, and then the residual £400,000 was on programmes 3 and 4. As I touched on earlier, admin costs of 2.7 million, including 1.3 million salaries and associated costs, and 900,000 on the variety of professional fees just mentioned, which is a slight increase from the prior 11-month period. A small amount of exceptional items, which is the completion of share option payments relating to the IPO in 2021, and a very small amount of finance income, where we received £4,000 interest relating to putting some money in the savings account as we've been through the year. As I touched on, our loss before tax was £7 million, and the loss for the period is £5.9 million from 4.7 in the prior financial period. As I touched on from the cash flow point of view, the cash absorbed from the operations we just talked through was £7 million. A small amount of interest that I touched on, and we received just under £200,000 back from the 2021 R&D claim. So our net outflow of cash from operations was £6.9 million. And so £6.9 million utilised in the year, which means our closing cash at April 2023 was £2.3 million. Our balance sheet, we've got minimal non-current assets, which is just what is left from our intangible licenses, £7,000 as at year end, which will be fully utilised in this period. We did an assessment and there's no impairment or revaluation required on those as at the year end. Our current assets, although down from the prior year, which is the cash utilisation, is made up of cash of 2.3 million, and the majority of the rest of the current assets was the 1.8 million pound receivable that we had at year end, although the 800,000 relating to 2022 has been paid post year end. Current liabilities have dropped during the year from 2 million down to just under £600,000. At the end of 2022, we had a large payable with one of our vendors who was doing the preclinical work on our lead program, but that was paid down through 2023. So we're exiting the year with £3.9 million worth of fixed assets. So that's a summary of the financial statements. I'll just spend a couple of short minutes talking about from a governance point of view and what we're doing at LCT currently. So we've got three pillars that we focus in on: environmental stewardship, stronger governance, and stakeholder engagement. Pleased to say that we really do recognise our responsibility to the environment. We are a remote working model as a business predominantly, which has improved our operational efficiency and through financial benefits by not having an office, and using electronic communication channels rather than face-to-face meetings. So we've got very little travel costs, which will be contributing to the emissions. Our second pillar is stronger governance. I'm very pleased to say that this year we've reported against the UK Corporate Governance Code in full for the first time, which helps us focus in on programme and risk management for the business. Our risk management is very, very key to us now, alongside our cash flow management, which is scrutinised on a regular basis through our executive team and then the board. Risk is reviewed through our executive and operational teams continuously, and it is a high focus on every of our board meetings. So governance and risk management has become embedded in our culture and will continue to do so going forward. And our third pillar, which is of most importance, arguably, is our stakeholder engagement. Certainly over the last 12 months, we've tried to, and I believe we've been open and transparent in our communication where possible, but also trying to have a 360-degree view and actively seeking feedback from all of our stakeholders. And as it says here, we do believe our success is built on strong relationships with all our stakeholders, particularly our shareholders, vendors, and employees, and we'll continue to build on those and maintain those as we go forward, to maintain the success that we've had this year and to continue it going forward. And that's the end of my short presentation. So I'm back to you now, Clarissa.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. So just a couple of words on post-balance sheet events. I think it's always important to look forward a little bit when you're doing annual results, because the last 12 months we've been and gone, and yes, we've had some fantastic progress over that time, but I'm a bit of a forward-facing person, so looking at these events that have happened post-balance sheet is important too. I've already talked about the appointment of our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Tim Corn. It's really significant for us because as we've moved, from that preclinical stage company with, never having had a program in the clinic before, to starting that phase 1 and transitioning to the clinical stage company that we now are, it was fundamental, in my view, to bring on board a sort of senior leader in the field and a recognized figure in the field, and Tim is exactly that. He's super experienced, as I've said, previously CMO at Jazz and others, Confo Therapeutics. He's also a medical director and advisor there. So Tim has got heaps of experience and, of course, and a great network in the pharmaceutical industry, as well as that lead role in over 20 regulatory approvals in the US and in Europe, which is clearly a key part of our future strategy. The expansion into oncology was also a very big moment for us at OCT, having previously been focused on that significant £60 billion pain market. The expansion into oncology does just demonstrate that the potential of cannabinoids is I think largely untapped, as I've said, and we've got potential in that library. It's a candidate from our cannabinoid derivative library that has allowed us to expand into oncology with that potential first-in-class immunotherapy agent for the treatment of solid tumours. Really excited from the team about that. Of course, we had the MHRA and Ethics Committee approval post-period end in May, which allowed us to kick off that phase 1, getting our first successful administration of a dose into a healthy volunteer in July of this year. And as I said, that trial is progressing as we expected. I'd just like to close with a quote from our chair, Julie Pomeroy. So I think, as I said at the beginning, cannabinoids are very dear to our hearts here at OCT, and we do believe that the potential is untapped. And just Julie saying here that by working together, we've got the power, the power to change lives and shape the future of cannabinoid medicine for the benefit of patients worldwide. So that's the end of the slides. I think probably now we just turn to the questions. Excuse me, losing my voice.
Perfect. Clarissa, Paul, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated in the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions that have been submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. As you can see, we've received a number of questions throughout today's presentation, and if I could just hand back over to you just to read through those questions and give responses where it's appropriate to do so, I'll pick up from you at the end.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've had some good questions here. So a couple on costs of potential phase 2s and combined trials. And I can't give you sort of specific costs here today, but of course we are always looking at the budgeting and the plans for how we're going to bring these compounds and these programs through the next important phases of their development. Somebody asking about the phase 1 that we're in and how well it's going. And as I said, we can't give any sort of particular details on the progress of that trial, other than to say that it is proceeding to our satisfaction and is in line with timeframes and expectations. I think that's probably as much as I can say on that one. In terms of timings, as I said, calendar Q3, so not long at all to wait for that to be concluded. Somebody also asking about how we intend to raise cash. And I think one of the things that we've always said to our shareholders is that we are very mindful, of course, of dilution. We want to make sure we're preserving shareholder value as far as we can. So we're always very careful about the plans and the ways in which we can raise capital. We're always looking at non-dilutive capital opportunities and a variety of ways of funding the business as we go past, that April timeline. We announced, of course, that we'll be looking to raise and to work on that funding in the coming months, so that we would sort of leave ourselves in a difficult position come next year. So that's very much front of mind for the board, but we're always mindful of the dilution and the impact on shareholders. A question, I think, I'm just looking to make sure I've covered off as many as I can. I'm actually able to talk to this afternoon. Another one here actually on competitors, which is an interesting question. So we're in an interesting space here. So in terms of competitors, it's not necessarily the way we tend to think of it. We're really trying to follow in the footsteps of GW Pharmaceuticals is the company that obviously I think everybody comes front of mind when we think about cannabinoids and the success that you can have with cannabinoid medicines. So GW, of course, taking their drug Epidiolex through to regulatory approval and then being acquired by Jazz Pharmaceuticals for pretty much $7 billion US dollars back a couple of years ago now in 2021. That's the big ambition. So I think we're all acutely aware of the serious potential that cannabinoids can have, not just to create shareholder value and commercial value, but also the impact on patients who are living with very difficult conditions. Any more questions? I think that's probably all the questions that we can answer currently in the Q&A.
Perfect. And thank you very much for that. I think you've addressed those questions you can from investors. And of course, the company will review all the questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, Clarissa, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Certainly. So thank you again to everybody who has dialed in to listen to our presentation today. We do appreciate your time. Your time is precious. So we are delighted that you've chosen to spend some of it with us. And also to our shareholders who, I think it's fair to say, have had a reasonably rough ride or can have a rough ride in the markets. It's a difficult market out there at the moment. And I would just say that the share price that we're currently sitting at is in no way reflective, in my view or in the board's view, of the value that is being generated by this company and the potential that we've got. So we do thank you for sticking with us and supporting us through, I think, what is a fairly turbulent time in the public markets.
Clarissa, Paul, thank you once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you know, we automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies Holdings PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation and good afternoon to you all.
Thank you.